Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Music pounded against the high-arched walls of the Townsend Mansion's ballroom, mingling with the glitter of crystal chandeliers overhead. The place was alive with a swirl of elegantly costumed guests' masks, satin gowns, sleek tuxedos. But beneath the veneer of grace and champagne, tension brewed. From somewhere near the grand piano, a lively waltz drifted across the crowd. At first glance, it might have looked like any upscale charity event. Carefully curated flower arrangements, a line of silver trays topped with tiny hors d'oeuvres, clusters of city officials clinking wine glasses. But as you moved deeper into the dance floor, you could feel something was off. Conversations weren't polite murmurs. They were hushed with apprehension, punctuated by gasps and the occasional hiss of disapproval. In the center of it all, Miranda Townsend teetered in her stilettos just enough that you wondered how many glasses she'd had. Her dark, wavy hair trailed down her back, a midnight blue mask accentuating cheekbones that gave her a refined, almost regal air. And yet, her posture was decidedly unqueenly. She leaned heavily on the arm of a younger man, Spencer Klein, who wore a tailored suit and a sleek black half-mask. He was tall, but she still pressed flush against him, looking up at him in a way that betrayed far more than a casual dance. From across the floor, a group of onlookers stared, scandalized. In the low, flickering light of the chandelier, you could see parted lips, raised eyebrows, the sort of stifled laughter that signifies something is very wrong. Standing at the edge of the guests well within sight was Garrett Townsend. He wore no mask, just his formal suit. His face was tense, the lines in his forehead deep enough to betray both anger and hurt. A couple of acquaintances hovered around him, trying to offer reassurance. "Garrett, are you just gonna let her?" whispered one friend, a dark-haired woman named Becky Hansen, who'd known the Townsends for years. He shook his head, gave a soft grunt. "Not sure there's anything I can do right now," he muttered, voice thick with controlled fury. Another guest, a local businessman, turned to his wife and whispered behind a champagne flute. The nerve of that woman, and in her own home, no less. Garrett caught the remark, but he stood rooted in place. His eyes flicked from Miranda's swaying figure to Spencer's self-satisfied grin. The music soared. The entire scene felt like a grotesque parody of the waltz it was supposed to be. Strings soared from the small orchestra to the left, but the swirling dancers parted like water around Miranda and Spencer as if repelled by an invisible force. Miranda's mask slipped slightly down her nose. She didn't seem to care. Her glassy eyes were fixed on Spencer, whose palm rested comfortably at the small of her back. She let out something between a nervous giggle and a moan. The hush in the room became more pronounced. Across the dance floor, one might hear quick bursts of conversation, barely stifled remarks about a marital scandal or poor Garrett. Finally, Miranda's heel wobbled. Spencer gripped her elbow, stabilizing her, leaning down to whisper into her ear. The hush broke into scattered chatter. Someone had seen them slip away earlier. Had they gone upstairs? Some insisted Miranda had been gulping down cocktails for over an hour. At that moment, Becky risked a glance at Garrett. "This is surreal," she breathed. "I mean, shouldn't you talk to her?" His tone came out measured, cold. "Becky, trust me, I've tried everything. Tonight, everything changes." He didn't elaborate. Becky looked away, uncertain. Meanwhile, the waltz reached its final crescendo. The pair in the middle of the floor stood out like a neon sign in a room of whispers. Then Spencer nodded toward the shadowy alcove near the carved marble columns. Miranda, still leaning on him, let out a soft laugh. Without even looking at the faces gawking at her, she allowed him to guide her to the side door that led into a dimly lit corridor. Garrett stiffened. He was about to move closer when the conductor signaled the next piece of music something faster, more brassy. It startled people, scattering the dancers. Suddenly, a crash broke through the new tune. A shrill yelp cut the air. Heads snapped toward that darkened alcove. The chandelier's reflection glinted off shattered glass near a half-open door. A panicked voice, Miranda's, rose. "Stop it! Just—" The voice died in a muffled exclamation, then another crash. Several guests gasped, inching forward to peer into the gloom. Garrett let out a tight breath, his fists clenched at his sides. In the hush that followed, you could almost feel the entire party leaning in, hearts pounding, waiting to see what unspoken drama was about to explode. Someone turned off the music. The abrupt silence was worse than the tension of the waltz. Footsteps approached the door from the inside. The corridor lights flickered, but all anyone could see was the edge of Spencer's shoe stepping backward, and a single breathy hiss from Miranda. Her mask, half falling off, skittered out of the darkness and landed near someone's foot. A woman in a gold gown pressed her hand to her mouth. Then came the final sound, an unmistakable hollow thud, like metal colliding with wood. The crowd froze, eyes darting from Garrett to that ominous corner. Half of them expected him to rush in, to intervene. Yet he didn't move, and nobody else dared speak. In that breathless hush, the stage was set for a night the Townsend's guests would never forget. Sunlight crept through the blinds of the Townsend family home, a two-story craftsman tucked in a quiet suburb. The morning air felt crisp, carrying the faint scent of evergreen and newly cut grass. Garrett Townsend was already awake, standing in the kitchen in his worn gray t-shirt and jeans, flipping pancakes on a skillet. The TV mumbled in the background local news about a charity event downtown. A typical Tuesday morning. He glanced at the clock. 6:45 a.m. His daughters, Claire and Lily, needed to be up soon. Claire was 10, Lily 8, both in that phase of early grade school brimming with energy and mischief. Already he could hear Lily rummaging in her room upstairs, probably searching for her missing sock. When Garrett poured juice into small glasses, footsteps sounded on the stairs. It was Miranda, his wife. She was dressed in a tailored black pencil skirt, matching blazer, hair in a neat twist. She always looked so poised, like she was heading to a press conference, and in a way she was. As the head of a prestigious private school, she often joked that her life was a walking PR campaign. "Morning," Garrett said, trying to sound casual. He offered her a faint smile. She nodded, rummaging through her purse. "Running late. Do me a favor and pick up the dry cleaning today, will you?" Her eyes flicked over him, then slid away. Lately, that was how it went. A 2-second glance, an order, and out the door. No warmth, no morning kiss. Garrett swallowed the pang of disappointment. He forced a grin. "Sure, pancakes for breakfast?" Miranda tapped her watch. "I'm sorry, I have a meeting at 8. "I'll grab coffee on the way." She whirled around as Claire trotted into the kitchen, backpack half open. "Mom, we have that father-daughter day next month, right? Miss Parker said I need to turn in the form," but Miranda barely paused. "Talk to your dad, honey. I have to go." In one sweeping motion, she kissed Lily's cheek, which the little girl hardly had time to reciprocate, and headed for the door. Claire and Lily exchanged glances. Garrett cleared his throat as the front door closed. "All right, kiddos. Don't let those pancakes get cold. Let's go." He tried to mask the unease behind a smile, but it lingered around him like the smell of burnt toast. Miranda's abruptness wasn't entirely new, but recently it had ramped up. As he packed Claire and Lily into his old truck for school drop-off, he couldn't shake the feeling that something else was going on. At the same time, across town at the Westbridge Academy, Miranda stepped out of her car and surveyed the manicured lawns. She paused to answer a phone call, Russell Harrington, her father. When she picked up, her voice was crisp, professional. "Yes, Dad, I'm meeting the board today. Don't worry. I have everything under control, I know. I'll make sure the press sees me as a strong candidate." She ended the call and exhaled sharply, pushing aside a fleeting guilt about skipping family breakfast. In the grand scheme of her ambitions, a potential leap into politics, she believed everything else would just have to fall in line. The third-floor office of Russell Harrington didn't just feel executive, it felt intimidating. A wide mahogany desk, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, and an array of framed photographs featuring politicians and major donors. Russell was a big fish in these political waters. He sat behind the desk, discussing local policy with a couple of his associates. Conversation drifted from potential lobbying opportunities to rumors swirling around City Hall. Eventually, the older man leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest. "Gentlemen," Russell said with a thin smile, My daughter is poised to become more than just a private school headmaster. She has a real shot at the city council next year. That means we need an impeccable family profile, no loose ends." "Understood," replied one of the associates, skimming through a folder. "But I've heard whispers. Something about her husband being a cabinet maker, possibly a mismatch with her social standing." Russell let out a sigh. "Garrett Townsend, solid man, but—" He narrowed his eyes. "If he gets in the way, we'll have to handle it. Publicly, they look like the perfect suburban couple, so hopefully no trouble. But I'm not naive. Men like him can turn sour if they feel threatened." Seconds later, the door opened. Miranda stepped inside, glancing at her father's associates with polite acknowledgement. Russell waved them out before turning his attention to her. "How's Westbridge Academy?" he asked. "Growing in enrollment," Miranda replied. "And I'm building strong relationships with some donors. The charity masquerade we're hosting next week at our home should help." Russell considered her with a steely gaze. "Yes, that event is critical. We need the best city officials, the bishop from St. Mark's, those media folks, all of them to see you and your husband playing the harmonious power couple." Miranda dipped her head in agreement, though her stomach churned. "Yes, well, Garrett's supportive," she lied, ignoring the memory of how distant he'd seemed that morning. Russell rose from his chair and stepped forward, resting a fatherly but firm hand on her shoulder. "Just remember, if your husband fails to keep up appearances, we can't afford a scandal. You let me know if there's any sign of trouble." Miranda forced a smile. "Yes, Dad." But internally, she wondered if it was more complicated than that. Lately, Garrett was drifting, or maybe she was the one pulling away. She forced the thought aside, focusing instead on her father's instructions. After all, her ambitions had a price, and so far, her marriage had been the currency. Late afternoon sunlight lit up Garrett's workshop, a place that usually felt like home. Rows of polished wood planks, tools meticulously arranged on the walls, the smell of sawdust and varnish. Garrett found solace in the rhythmic hum of his sander. It was his therapy, a space where everything stayed under his control. He turned off the sander when his phone buzzed. Mason Vickers, a longtime friend and occasional business partner, strolled in with a half grin. Mason, broad-shouldered and bearded, was the type who kept an ear on local gossip. "Hey, man," Mason began, glancing around at Garrett's half-finished oak cabinets. "Heard about your wife's big charity event next week. Must be exciting times." Garrett shrugged, carefully placing his sander aside. "Yeah, big crowd. Lots of donors. Miranda's father pulled out all the stops. Should help her career." Mason hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. I gotta say something. Might be just rumor. But see, the guys at that bar near City Hall..." He paused, lowering his voice. "Word is, this PR hotshot named Spencer Klein's been bragging about dating a powerful woman, allegedly a private school headmistress with connections." Instantly, a knot formed in Garrett's stomach. "Spencer Klein," he repeated, quiet. He'd heard the name once or twice. "Could be anyone, right? Maybe not." Miranda Mason offered a sympathetic look. "I hope I'm wrong, but it's going around. People said he's real loud about it." A tense silence settled. Garrett clenched his jaw. The idea that Miranda, his wife, might be entangled with a flashy PR guy felt unreal, a bad dream. Yet something about the last few months, her phone calls, her distant gaze, it all slid into place too easily. That night, Garrett barely touched his dinner. The girls bickered about coloring books while Miranda sat at her laptop shooting emails. He summoned courage. "Hey, honey, can we talk for a second?" She looked up, mildly irritated. "I'm swamped right now, Garrett. Can it wait?" He forced a small smile. "It's important. It's about you, me, this event next week." She sighed, rubbed her temple. "Sure, but make it quick." They retreated to the living room, where soft lamplight cast shadows across the walls. Garrett's heart pounded. He tried to keep his voice steady. "Is there something you want to tell me? About you and your work life?" Miranda's eyes flashed. "What do you mean?" He swallowed. "Mason mentioned that there's talk in certain circles about a Spencer Klein." For an instant, her face flickered with genuine surprise or fear, he couldn't tell which. Then she gathered herself. "Oh, that's nonsense. Spencer is a PR consultant who's pitched ideas for the academy. We've met once or twice. Don't blow it out of proportion. The way her words spilled out so quickly made his skin prickle, but he said nothing. Instead, he nodded, mouth set in a hard line. Miranda pivoted, arms folded. I'm exhausted. The masquerade is next week, and I need everything perfect. Maybe don't bring up wild rumors right now, okay? He wanted to push further, but something in her tone warned him off. The conversation ended as abruptly as it began. She left for the upstairs study, leaving him alone on the couch, mind swirling with suspicion. In the silence, Garrett rubbed his temples, recalling the easy laughter they once shared. He stared at the coffee table, fighting the sense that the woman he married was slipping beyond his reach, and for the first time, a knot of real dread took hold in his chest, whispering that these next few weeks might upend his entire life. A bright banner reading West Coast Education Conference hung outside the chic Riverside Hotel. The place hummed with the chatter of educators and administrators in tailored suits, shuttling between lobby coffee stations and breakout sessions. Miranda Townsend, wearing a fitted blazer and pencil skirt, stepped out of a taxi, her heels clicking on polished marble floors as she entered the lobby. She scanned the crowd, mostly middle-aged teachers comparing notes and younger professionals eager to network. Miranda's schedule was packed: presentations on curriculum innovation, a luncheon with potential donors, and a panel about private school leadership. But the real weight pressing on her mind was a secret tension she couldn't quite name. It tugged her thoughts away from home, away from the half-hearted goodbye she'd offered Garrett that morning. In the elevator, she closed her eyes and inhaled slowly. Just a weekend, she whispered, hoping she could relax. After all, no kids, no domestic friction. She could focus on her career. But stepping out on the 10th floor, she immediately spotted Spencer Klein leaning against a corridor wall, phone in hand. He wore a crisp, dark suit without a tie, exuding casual confidence. "Fancy running into you here," he said, smiling as if it was pure coincidence. She raised an eyebrow. "I thought you said you had PR business in LA this week." He shrugged, slipping his phone into his pocket. "Change of plans. My boss sent me here for a few meetings, and I heard you'd be attending this conference." The playful glint in his eyes suggested he'd engineered the coincidence. Miranda felt her pulse flutter. She knew this was trouble, but found herself strangely exhilarated. "Well," she managed, "I'm leading a panel in an hour, then maybe dinner tonight?" His grin widened. "Count on it." The day passed in a blur of keynote speeches and conda sessions. Miranda answered educators' questions with poise, occasionally catching Spencer's gaze in the audience. By the time she returned to her hotel room that evening, she was both tired and wired. The city lights glowed through the window, reflecting on the river. Part of her wanted to shower, order room service, and bury herself in bed, but her phone pinged. "Spencer, dinner at Portico's restaurant, ground floor, 8 p.m., don't be late." She stared at the text, biting her lip. A voice in the back of her mind warned her to keep a professional distance. But it had been ages since she'd felt this mix of flirtation and adrenaline. Swallowing a surge of guilt, she changed into a sleek black dress, pinned up her hair, and reminded herself that she just wanted a friendly meal. Their dinner began innocently. A corner table, low jazz music, a glass of wine. Yet as minutes slipped by, the conversation grew more personal than academic about her dissatisfaction at home, about Spencer's big ambitions in PR, about the spark she felt whenever they talked. Halfway through the second wine glass, Miranda caught herself leaning closer to him, enthralled by his confidence and the thrilling risk of it all. They talked and laughed until the restaurant lights dimmed for closing. Spencer walked her to the elevator bank, gently brushed her hand. She made a half-hearted joke about professional boundaries, but when the elevator doors slid open, she found herself letting him step inside with her. One thing led to another. A flicker of hesitation flashed in Miranda's eyes, how this might upend her entire life. But the tension of the last few months, the distance between her and Garrett, the demands of her father, it all coalesced into a single moment of impulsive choice. She crossed a line she swore she never would. Later that night, well past midnight, Miranda's phone buzzed on the nightstand. Still groggy, she answered in a hushed voice. It was Garrett, sounding concerned. She scrambled to keep her voice steady, stepping out into the hallway so Spencer wouldn't overhear. "You sound out of breath? Everything okay?" Garrett asked quietly. Her heart hammered. I was just about to sleep. What is it?" He paused. "I was hoping we could talk, but it's late. Sorry." Behind Miranda, Spencer stirred, his footsteps soft on the carpet. Garrett's ears picked up a second voice, his name, maybe. Miranda panicked, covering the phone with her palm. "Miranda?" Garrett's tone sharpened. She forced a quick laugh. "Just a colleague here. Got the rooms mixed up. Look, we'll talk tomorrow, okay?" Ending the call, Miranda felt a cold wave of guilt. The realization hit. She'd done the unthinkable, and Garrett might already suspect something. Back home, the Townsend living room felt strangely hollow. The evening news played, but Garrett hardly registered the anchorman's droning. He stared at his phone in silent frustration. Miranda's abrupt hang-up replayed in his head, the uncertain tone in her voice, the muffled male voice behind her. Every fiber of his being clenched with an unfamiliar anger. He dialed her number again, but it went straight to voicemail. "Miranda, call me back," he muttered, then dropped the phone onto the couch. A knock at the front door startled him. Mason Vickers stepped in, letting himself in like a longtime friend. He carried a six-pack of beer. "Figured you could use a distraction, man," Mason offered, setting the bottles on the coffee table. Garrett forced a smile. "Thanks, though I'm not sure how much a beer can fix." Mason popped open 2 bottles, handing one over. After a few sips, he cleared his throat. "So, about Spencer Klein, I heard fresh rumors at McGuire's bar. He's bragging again, claiming he's got a powerful woman wrapped around his finger." Mason glanced at Garrett carefully. "He's apparently out of town this weekend, same time your wife is." Garrett sank back, a dull ache in his chest. "Everything points that way, doesn't it?" He swallowed, not wanting to say the word affair. Mason nodded, empathy in his gaze. "I'm sorry, man." The hours crawled. After Mason left, Garrett paced the house, the silence punctuated by the hum of the fridge and a ticking wall clock. Finally, around midnight, he grabbed his laptop, looking up family law attorneys in the area. The next morning, after a sleepless night, he forced himself to call Mia Delgado, a lawyer a co-worker had once recommended. Sitting in Delgado's cramped office that afternoon, Garrett explained the suspicious circumstances. She listened intently, eyebrows furrowing. "Look," she said, "if your wife truly is having an affair, a straightforward divorce might still not guarantee you custody. In this state, infidelity alone doesn't always decide. Miranda's father has resources, right?" Garrett grimaced. "Plenty. Russell Harrington. He can bury me in legal fees if he wants." Delgado nodded. "Then we need to be careful. Document everything. Texts, calls. Stay calm. Gather evidence." She leaned forward, voice firm. "If you go in guns blazing, he'll outmaneuver you." Garrett shook her hand at the end of the meeting, mind awash with worry. On the drive home, he replayed Delgado's warning. He had to keep a level head, because if he lost it, Russell would crush him. That night, he stared at the empty side of the bed. He pictured Miranda, away at some fancy hotel, possibly in another man's arms. Anger warred with heartbreak until he felt numb. Finally, he drifted into a restless sleep, already plotting how to protect himself, and more importantly, protect Claire and Lily. Late afternoon sunlight threw long shadows across the Townsend front porch when a sleek black SUV rolled up outside. Russell Harrington stepped out, smoothing his tailored suit with an air of practiced authority. Garrett, alerted by the engine noise, opened the front door, heart pounding. Russell climbed the porch steps, every movement calculated. "Garrett," he said with forced politeness, "mind if we speak inside?" Though alarm bells rang in Garrett's mind, he stepped aside, letting Russell into the living room. The older man surveyed the modest furniture, the kids' drawings pinned to the fridge, the scattered evidence of a normal family life. Finally, Russell turned to face Garrett, eyes cold. "I've heard some ugly rumors, son," he began, voice low. "Allegations about my daughter, my married daughter, and a certain PR guy." He paused, letting his words hang. "But imagine if, instead, people heard different rumors, that you're the unfaithful one, that you're abusive or incompetent. Garrett's gut twisted. So you'd fabricate lies about me? Russell shrugged like it was nothing. If you value your wife's reputation, if you value your children's future, you'll keep any accusations or suspicions to yourself. For all our sakes. Garrett clenched his fists at his sides. He wanted to shout or argue, but Delgado's advice reverberated in his mind. Stay calm. So he inhaled, forcing steadiness. I'm not out to cause a scene, sir. I love my kids. I just want to make sure they're okay. Russell tilted his head, expression softening into something almost paternal. Good. Then we have an understanding. As long as you remain discreet, life can continue smoothly. But if you cause trouble, his voice dropped, you'll regret it. A heavy silence settled. Finally, Russell brushed a speck of dust off his sleeve. Let Miranda handle her conference and come home. Let's keep the Townsend name respectable, With that, he strode out, leaving Garrett seething in the aftermath. Out on the porch, the SUV door slammed, engine revving. Garrett's heart hammered. He stared at the tire tracks left on his driveway. The magnitude of Russell's threat sank in. If he tried to publicly expose Miranda's affair, Russell would bury him with false charges or worse. For the first time, Garrett realized the rules of this game were dangerously skewed in Harrington's favor. A few days later, Miranda sat in a dimly lit corner of Perot's Coffee, a discreet cafe on the outskirts of town. The conference had ended, but she'd lingered in that city an extra day under the pretext of meeting potential donors. In truth, she'd arranged to see Spencer before heading home. Now, stirring a latte she barely tasted, she felt a tangle of guilt and excitement swirl in her chest. Spencer arrived, sliding into the chair opposite her. He looked just as self-assured as ever hairstyled, a subtle cologne that reminded her of that night at the hotel. "Glad you stayed," he said, leaning forward. "I've been thinking about you non-stop." She lowered her gaze. "This can't keep happening," she managed, though her voice lacked conviction. Spencer smirked. "Why not? I mean, your marriage is basically done, right? You've said so yourself." Miranda's cheeks warmed. "I never said it was over. It's complicated." He reached across the small table, brushed her fingertips. She flinched, but didn't pull away. "Complicated because you're tied to your father's expectations? Or your fancy private school image?" He let out a soft laugh. "Don't you want something real? Something that makes you feel alive?" Her stomach twisted at the question. In the past week, she'd been lying to Garrett, to her colleagues, to herself, and there was no denying that Spencer's presence electrified her. Yet the stakes loomed large: her 2 daughters, her job, her reputation, her father's ambitions. She took a slow breath. "Spencer, you're asking me to blow up my entire life. My father will be furious. Garrett, well, he's the father of my kids. This isn't just about me," he scoffed. "So you'll be stuck in a loveless marriage forever? For show?" His eyes bore into hers. Miranda didn't respond, a leaden weight settling in her chest. She gazed past Spencer's shoulder, noticing the cafe's wrought iron light fixtures and chalkboard menus details easier to focus on than her own moral crisis. Eventually, her phone buzzed. She checked the screen. A text from Garrett. "Masquerade at our place next weekend. Your father says it's critical. Let's talk details when you get home." An uneasy jolt ran through her. Another elaborate event where everyone would watch them, expecting the perfect couple act. The notion made her head spin, especially after what she'd done. She mustered a weak smile at Spencer and slipped her phone back into her purse. "I have to go," she said, standing abruptly. "I'll call you later." Spencer rose, catching her arm. "Miranda, don't keep me waiting around forever. Either you want this, or you don't." She nodded, though her thoughts churned too wildly to form a proper reply. Outside, the afternoon sky had darkened with storm clouds. She tugged her coat tighter, the wind ruffling her hair. As raindrops began to fall, she felt the weight of her choices caught between a respectable facade and the temptation of a new life. Even as she slid into her car, the phone's message about the masquerade replayed in her mind. And so, with a rush of dread, Miranda realized she was heading back to Garrett, back to the father she couldn't disappoint, and to a house of cards that threatened to come crashing down if she made a single wrong move. A steady drizzle fell on the polished streets of downtown Greenbridge, the city lights reflecting in little pools of rainwater. Garrett Townsend slipped out of his truck and pulled up the hood of his windbreaker. He glanced around, no sign of anyone he recognized, which was precisely what he wanted. Tonight, anonymity was crucial. He made his way into a nondescript office building that housed a handful of businesses, everything from immigration lawyers to an exclusive concierge service known as Sterling Eclipse. Inside, muted overhead lighting revealed a short hallway. A discreet brass plaque read, "Sterling Eclipse appointments only." Garrett drew a breath and pushed open the glass door. A slim woman in a charcoal-gray dress with a neat chignon Lydia by her nameplate greeted him from behind a reception desk. She eyed him with polite curiosity. "May I help you?" He steadied his voice. "I'm here to speak with Miss Raines." Lydia pressed a button on her phone console. "Your 6 o'clock is here, Cassandra." Moments later, a tall woman with a confident stride emerged from a side office. Cassandra Raines wore a tailored black blazer and carried herself with an air of cool professionalism. From her posture alone, Garrett guessed she'd heard all manner of strange requests in her line of work. "Mr. Townsend?" she said softly. "Come on back." She guided him into a small consultation room that smelled faintly of vanilla. The walls were adorned with neutral art beach sunsets, abstract shapes to set a calming tone. Garrett took a seat in a leather chair opposite Cassandra's desk, noticing how she evaluated him with clear, discerning eyes. "So," she began, folding her hands, "Sterling Eclipse typically arranges escorts for formal events. You requested something more specialized." Garrett's chest tightened. He'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, but it still felt surreal. "I need someone to impersonate my wife at a party," he said plainly. "Full masquerade, including the same perfume, a matching dress, identical hair, all of it." Cassandra arched a brow, though her voice remained poised. "I've been asked for some wild things, Mr. Townsend, but impersonating a spouse is new, even for me. Care to explain why?" He hesitated, aware of how risky this was. "Let's just say there's a major social event at my home. I want my wife to appear unfaithful. Dramatize it, if you will." Cassandra kept her gaze level. "That's a dangerous game. Usually, if a husband wants to catch his wife cheating, he hires a PI, not an impersonator." She tapped a manicured nail on the table. "I'm guessing you need a staged scene, correct?" Garrett exhaled, voice low. "Yeah, it has to look genuine, because if this goes right, nobody will suspect it's staged. They'll think my wife did everything on her own." Silence stretched between them. Cassandra's eyes flickered with curiosity. "I assume you've considered the legal and moral implications." "I have," he said, though guilt prickled his conscience. "My kids are on the line. If I don't fight back, I risk losing them to an unjust system." That last sentence held a tremor that made Cassandra's features soften, just a fraction. She leaned back in her chair. "What exactly do you need me to do?" Garrett laid out the basics: an upcoming masquerade party, the arrival time, and the choreography of the switch. He would slip his wife a mild sedative so she'd be asleep. Cassandra would step into her place, wearing a matching gown and mask. She'd then behave scandalously with a male partner on the dance floor in front of high-profile guests, ensuring everyone believed it was truly Miranda. By the time he was finished, Cassandra nodded slowly. "It's elaborate, but I've done costume work before modeling. Minor theatrical gigs. If your wife and I have a similar build and with a mask covering half my face, the effect could be convincing." Garrett's heart pounded. He hated talking about Miranda this way, yet desperation eclipsed guilt. "I'm ready to pay, and I can handle the materials: dress, perfume, whatever you need." Cassandra opened a slim planner. "I need 2 short meetings with you beforehand to try on the dress, get the right hair, rehearse the mannerisms. Also, I'll bring my own plus-own to help me sell the act." She locked eyes with him. "And I do mean strictly professional. Understood?" Garrett held her gaze. "Understood." She slid a contract and discreet payment form across the desk. "All right, Mr. Townsend, I'll do it. Just remember, once we start, there's no turning back." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I know." And with that, their clandestine deal was sealed. Miranda's suitcase wheels clacked against the hardwood floor as she entered the Townsend residence, a tense ache behind her eyes from the long drive home. The weekend conference had stretched into nearly a week, courtesy of an extra day with Spencer. Now, a swirl of anxiety threaded through her. The upcoming masquerade was mere days away, and she expected a barrage of questions from Garrett. Yet when she stepped into the kitchen, she found him oddly calm. He was wiping the counter, a mild smile on his face. Claire and Lily's laughter drifted from the living room TV. Miranda dropped her purse on a side table. "Hey," she ventured, bracing for some show of anger. But Garrett just nodded. "Welcome back," he said lightly. "How was the conference?" She blinked, taken aback by his gentleness. "Busy. Meetings all day, every day," she said, keeping her tone neutral. He rinsed a cloth at the sink. "I'm making dinner. Pork chops, mashed potatoes. Kids are excited." Miranda narrowed her gaze, suspicion rising. Normally, he'd question her about the extended stay, or at least show a hint of hurt. Instead, he looked polite. If he was staging a casual facade, she couldn't tell. "Thanks. I'll just freshen up," she said, slipping away. Later, over dinner, Claire giggled about a funny story from school. Lily added her own comedic twist, and even Garrett joined in with good humor. Miranda forced a smile, feeling disconnected from their easy banter. In the back of her mind, Russell's repeated calls about fundraising and Spencer's flirtatious texts both weighed on her. Finally, as the girls finished and wandered off, Garrett glanced at Miranda. "We should talk about the masquerade soon. Your father called. Sounds like he's expecting an impressive turnout." She swallowed. "Right. He wants donors, city officials, maybe that bishop from St. John's, and Spencer." She trailed off, watching for Garrett's reaction. But he merely nodded, face unreadable. "Sure. I already put Spencer on the guest list," Garrett said. "You might want to confirm details with him, though. Food, schedule, that kind of thing." Miranda felt a strange chill. You're okay with that?" she asked. He half smiled. "Why wouldn't I be? This event is bigger than any personal feelings, right?" She sat back, unsettled by his acceptance. Moments later, her phone buzzed. The screen showed her father's name. She excused herself, stepping into the hallway. "Dad?" she answered, pressing the phone to her ear. Russell's voice boomed. "Miranda, I trust you're home now. Good. The masquerade must be perfect. I spoke to the bishop. He's confirmed attendance. Don't forget, image is everything. Keep your husband under control, no slip-ups." She clenched her jaw. "I'm aware. Garrett's being surprisingly cooperative. Maybe he's realized it's pointless to resist." Russell harumphed. "Let's hope. We can't afford any drama." Once the call ended, Miranda lingered in the dim hallway, heart pounding. Something in Garrett's manner put her on edge. She suspected there was more simmering beneath his calm facade, but she didn't know what. All she could do was keep up appearances and pray that nothing exploded before the masquerade. Over the next few days, the Townsend mansion buzzed with activity. A flurry of phone calls confirmed caterers, florists, and a jazz ensemble. A local lighting company delivered extra spotlights to transform the living area into a proper dance floor. Miranda circled each new development on a clipboard, checking tasks off with a near-frenzied focus. Meanwhile, Garrett worked behind the scenes on a different list, one neither Miranda nor Russell would ever suspect. Under the guise of prepping the house, he installed discreet security cameras in strategic corners, a small pinhole lens among the decorative vases, another perched high near a chandelier. He ensured they'd capture any performance that occurred. During a quick lunch break, he headed upstairs with a shopping bag containing a shimmering, deep blue gown, nearly identical to one Miranda owned. He passed by Claire in the hallway, who eyed the garment curiously. "Dad, is that Mom's dress?" He forced an easy grin. "Not exactly. Just something for decoration," he fibbed. "It's for the masquerade theme." Down the hall, he entered a small guest room where he'd stashed more items: a bottle of Miranda's signature perfume, a pair of matching heels, and a new mask. Cassandra would come by tomorrow for a final fitting. While tucking the dress into a plastic garment bag, Garrett's phone chimed, a text from Cassandra. "Cassandra, all set for tomorrow's rehearsal. My partner Adam will be with me. Garrett typed back a quick acknowledgement. Great. 2 p.m. sharp. We'll keep it short. He paused, gaze drifting to a small bedside table drawer that contained a prescription bottle tranquilizers, originally prescribed to Miranda after a stress-related issue last year. He'd discovered them recently, nearly full. He lifted the bottle, heart thudding. The plan was to slip a few crushed pills into a drink, enough to render Miranda groggy for hours but not cause harm. Even reading the dosage instructions made him uneasy. Still, he told himself this was necessary. He remembered the attorney's grim warning. If he didn't turn the tables, he risked being painted as the villain. Fear for Claire and Lily's future burned away any last shred of hesitation. That afternoon, Cassandra arrived with her boyfriend, Adam Lyles, a broad-shouldered guy with a light stubble and easygoing smile. Garrett led them upstairs to the guest room, carefully locking the door behind. Cassandra slipped on the blue gown, adjusting the shoulder straps to better mimic Miranda's style. Adam stood back, arms folded, offering commentary on posture. They practiced walking, twirling, ensuring Cassandra could pass as Miranda from behind, especially under dim, color-shifting lights. This is about more than just looking like her, Cassandra mused, smoothing the dress's fabric. I need to move like she might move, hold the wine glass a certain way. I'll watch videos or photos of her if you have any. Garrett found some recent footage on his phone, Miranda giving a short speech at Westbridge Academy. Cassandra studied how Miranda gestured, how she tilted her head. Then Adam stepped in, pantomiming an intimate dance. Cassandra mirrored what she'd do at the masquerade, leaning in too close, a provocative whisper, a playful laugh. It felt unsettlingly real, and Garrett's gut twisted to see someone replicate his wife's mannerisms so precisely. When they were done, Cassandra changed back into her everyday clothes, carefully hanging the gown. We're all set, she said with quiet resolve. I'll show up an hour into the party, slip in the back gate like we planned. Garrett nodded stiffly. Right. I'll handle the rest, just be sure to cause a scene. Make everyone think Miranda's lost her mind. Cassandra exchanged a glance with Adam, then gave Garrett a firm nod. Understood. As they left, Garrett realized just how close he was to the point of no return. Night settled over the Townsend mansion with a hush, as though the house itself braced for the spectacle to come. Miranda sat at her vanity in the master bedroom, sorting through eyeshadow palettes, lipsticks, and a dozen hairpins. She stared into the mirror, frowning at the tension in her own eyes. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Garrett had been doting, dropping sweet comments about how lovely she'd look at the party, volunteering to help with final touches. Normally, she'd have welcomed the help, but the warmth felt too well, too perfect, like a mask plastered on for show. Her phone buzzed. A text from Spencer. Ready for tomorrow? I'm thinking about you, gorgeous. Miranda sighed, typing back a short message. Yes, I'll see you there. Just keep things discreet. Setting the phone aside, she began to brush her hair, each stroke echoing in the quiet room. Anxiety coiled in her chest. She pictured the swirl of guests expected, local officials, donors, her father's associates. Then there was Spencer, who clearly wanted more from her than a simple fling, and Garrett, who insisted they make this masquerade unforgettable. Her father, whose demands grew heavier by the day. At that thought, an uneasy chill prickled her skin. She glanced in the mirror once more, noticing a faint trembling in her hand. Despite all her professional achievements, right now, she felt powerless, trapped between her father's expectations, Spencer's enticements, and the uncertain dynamic with Garrett. A gentle knock on the door startled her. Garrett's voice followed. Miranda? You good? She cleared her throat. Yeah, just finishing up. Great. I made some tea if you want to calm your nerves. His tone was oddly soft. Miranda opened the door, regarding him with a wary glance. He held out a steaming mug, the aroma of chamomile drifting upward. For a moment, she wondered if it was genuine kindness or something more. But she took it anyway, forcing a faint smile. Thank you, she murmured, sipping carefully. He nodded, stepping away. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a big day. Alone again, Miranda closed the bedroom door and leaned against it, the chamomile still warm in her hands. Beneath the quiet facade of their household, she sensed tensions crackling like a pending thunderstorm. Part of her wanted to cancel the entire masquerade, but it was far too late for that. Guests were flying in, caterers were prepped. Her father would never allow such a retreat, so she swallowed back her fears. One night, she told herself, I can play the perfect hostess for just one night. Yet deep down, she knew once this masquerade began, the slightest wrong step could send everything spiraling out of control. A soft glow blanketed the Townsend mansion as dusk gave way to darkness. Lining the front walkway, flickering lanterns illuminated arriving guests, each dressed in elegant evening wear and ornate masks, some sleek and simple, others studded with faux jewels or adorned with sweeping plumes. Soft jazz music drifted through the open windows, a gentle invitation into an event meant to impress the city's elite. In the foyer, Miranda Townsend stood tall, welcoming everyone with a polished smile. She wore a luxurious silver gown and a matching half-mask, her hair pinned up to reveal graceful shoulders. From the outside, she was every bit the perfect hostess, gracious, poised, exuding confidence. Inside, her nerves jangled. The success of this masquerade could shape her father's political fortunes and her own public image. She silently prayed that her lingering unease would subside for the night. Stepping through the throng with a practiced grin, Russell Harrington, Miranda's father, shook hands and exchanged pleasantries. Bishop Caldwell, I'm delighted you could attend, he said in a smooth baritone, greeting a tall, gray-haired man in clerical attire. Next, he guided the bishop toward the champagne table, pointing out prominent donors. Though his face remained genial, a calculating glint shone in his eyes. Tonight was about power, forging alliances, sealing deals, ensuring his daughter's star continued to rise. Nearby, Garrett Townsend surveyed the growing crowd. He wore a simple black suit and an understated mask that covered only his eyes. His outward composure mirrored Miranda's, but inside, tension coiled in his chest. At the edge of the wide living room, a hired jazz quartet played a lively tune. Garlands of twinkling lights draped the walls, giving the space an ethereal shimmer. He caught a glimpse of Spencer Klein at the far side of the room, wearing a sleek, dark mask that left his smirk exposed. Miranda spoke with him briefly, her cheeks flushing at his low-voiced whispers. Garrett felt a flicker of bitterness tighten his stomach. Steady, keep your cool, he reminded himself. There was a reason he hadn't confronted Spencer openly. He needed tonight's display to unfold without suspicion. Just then, Becky Hansen, a longtime friend of the family, approached Garrett, masked in midnight blue lace. I can't believe how glamorous this is, Garrett, she commented, casting a cautious glance in Miranda's direction. Everything looks perfect. You must be proud. Pasting on a pleasant smile, Garrett nodded. Thanks. It took a lot of planning, but hopefully it'll be worth it. As the jazz piece concluded, he offered Becky a polite excuse and maneuvered through clusters of guests. Slipping into the kitchen, he found the large cut-glass punch bowl filled with fruit-laced white sangria. Unnoticed behind the bustle of the catering staff, Garrett withdrew a small packet from his pocket finely ground sedatives, enough to induce drowsiness. His heart beat furiously. This is it. Carefully, he sprinkled the powder into the punch, stirring gently until it dissolved. He stepped back, checking no one had witnessed him. The next stage of the plan involved making sure Miranda sipped enough of that punch to blur her senses. Before returning to the festivities, he took a steadying breath. I'm doing this for the girls, he told himself silently. There's no turning back now. Nearly an hour into the party, the mansion buzzed with chatter and music. Guests mingled in the main hall, sipping from crystal glasses. Miranda had nursed a glass of the punch bowl's sangria, partially to calm her nerves. The warmth in her chest felt heavier than simple alcohol, though she couldn't place why. She attributed it to stress, ignoring the mild fuzziness creeping into her head. Outside, in the side garden, a small iron gate swung open quietly. Cassandra Raines slipped in, clad in a replica silver gown almost identical to Miranda's, but hidden under a loose black cloak. By her side, Adam Lyles, her partner, straightened his masked face and tugged at the collar of his crisp shirt. The pair exchanged a determined glance, then hurried through the shadows toward a back entrance Garrett had left unlocked. Inside, Garrett guided them up a narrow staircase toward a guest bedroom. He gestured for silence, well aware that staff or even family friends could stumble across them at any moment. Once safely behind the closed door, Cassandra shed the black cloak. She looked eerily similar to Miranda from the neck-down, same style of updo wig, same perfume, same gown. Garrett nodded in grim approval. "Give me a few minutes," he whispered. "I need to make sure Miranda's alone and out of it." They parted ways. Garrett stealthily navigated back to the main floor. He found Miranda near the grand piano, half listening to an older couple rave about the decor. Her expression seemed slightly glazed, and her posture had gone slack. The sedative is working, he thought, swallowing a pang of guilt. "Hey, honey," he said gently, slipping an arm around her waist. She leaned on him more than usual, blinking slowly. "Garrett," she murmured, a hint of confusion in her voice. "I feel so tired. Maybe I should—" He nodded, painting concern onto his face. "You've been running yourself ragged, sweetheart. Let's get you upstairs for a quick rest. The guests will manage without you for a bit." She allowed him to guide her through the crowd, half smiling at passers-by who expressed well wishes. Russell Harrington shot them a questioning look, but Garrett waved dismissively, feigning a supportive gesture. By the time they reached the master bedroom, Miranda's eyes fluttered and she struggled to focus. He helped her onto the bed. Her mask slipped off and tumbled to the floor, revealing flushed cheeks. She tried to speak, but exhaustion muddled her words. Gently, Garrett smoothed her hair back. The guilt in his chest redoubled, but he forced himself to continue. He stepped into the adjoining bathroom, retrieving a simple satin nightgown. Quietly returning, he changed Miranda's gown with trembling hands, slipping the silver masquerade dress off her and replacing it with the satin garment. His wife lay limp, barely responsive. He double-checked her breathing steady, though slow. Pulling the covers over her, he laid the silver gown on a chair, grabbed her abandoned mask, and hurriedly left the room. Minutes later, in the dim hush of the guest bedroom, Cassandra stepped out from behind a decorative screen. She was now fully dressed in Miranda's silver gown and wore an identical mask. With the subtle adjustments made to her hair and scent, she felt like a phantom copy. She gave Adam a short nod. Her heart fluttered, pretending to be another man's wife in front of 100 guests was no small feat. Garrett, breath unsteady, handed her the final prop, a small perfume bottle labeled with Miranda's signature brand. Cassandra spritzed her neck. The familiar aroma caught in the air. "You're sure no one will suspect?" she asked, voice hushed. "In a crowded ballroom, half the faces masked, you'll be fine," Garrett said, though it sounded more like he was reassuring himself. "Let's do this." Cassandra, arm intertwined with Adam, descended the grand staircase like a queen returning to the throne. The chatter in the hall continued unabated at first, but within seconds a few heads turned, noticing Miranda reappearing with a distinctive new boldness. The hush spread like a ripple. Gone was the polite hostess from earlier. Cassandra had studied enough of Miranda's mannerisms to mimic her voice when she greeted a few startled guests, yet she added an extra flair, flicking her hair, letting Adam's hand rest possessively on her waist. It was daring, brash, and it drew gasps from those who recognized the dress. Near the center of the room, the jazz quartet switched to a sultry tune. Cassandra and Adam stepped onto the makeshift dance floor. In a swirl of silver fabric, she pressed close against him, letting her body language radiate seduction. A wave of confusion spread among the attendees. Whispers erupted. "Is that Miranda? She's never danced like that before. Good Lord, isn't she married? Where's Garrett?" Hovering by the catering table, Spencer frowned, trying to make sense of the woman in front of him. He'd heard from a friend that Miranda was out on the dance floor acting provocatively, but something about her posture looked off. Still, from across the room, her figure, mask, and hair were unmistakable. A knot of anger unfurled in his chest. Who is that man with her? Unable to contain himself, Spencer shoved through the crowd. The onlookers parted, letting him step onto the dance floor. Cassandra noticed him, and with a fleeting glance at Adam, fell into the next phase of their act. She let Adam's hand wander lower, then turned her head, stifling a melodramatic giggle, playing the part of a woman enthralled with her new dance partner. Spencer stood rigid, fury etching lines across his brow. "Miranda!" he hissed, gripping Cassandra's arm. "What the hell are you doing?" She flashed him a coquettish smile beneath the mask. "Spencer, darling," she purred, using the same endearment Miranda had once joked about. "Don't you see I'm busy?" A ripple of scandalized gasps hit the crowd. Some recognized Spencer as Miranda's rumored media consultant, but seeing him so obviously jealous set tongues wagging. The bishop coughed uncomfortably. Russell, in the corner, looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Spencer yanked her closer, his tone turning harsh. "We need to talk now." In perfect coordination, Cassandra's partner, Adam, spun her away from Spencer. Adam shot the real look of a protective lover. "Back off!" he growled. A hush fell across the dance floor. Spencer clenched his fists. "You're out of your mind!" he spat at Miranda. He then turned to Adam. "Get your hands off my—" He didn't finish the sentence. Cassandra, stepping up the drama, stomped her heel onto Spencer's foot, forcing him to stagger. "Don't be so possessive," she taunted, her voice just loud enough for the ring of bystanders to overhear. Spencer let out a strangled gasp, half from pain, half from shock. The onlookers drew in sharp breaths. At that moment, Garrett emerged from the edge of the crowd, eyes somber. He approached a small cluster of watchers, Judge Olson, Becky Hansen, and a couple of the Academy's board members. Wordlessly, he shook his head, as if in weary acceptance. "I wish I could stop this," he muttered, loud enough for them to hear. "But she warned me. She said if I ever tried to interfere, she'd ruin me." His voice carried heartbreak. "She wanted a lover out in the open, told me to put up with it or face the consequences." A stunned hush spread. Becky's face paled. "Garrett, you can't be serious." He gave a miserable shrug. "I've tried everything. This is what she wanted." Several guests had begun snapping photos on their phones or whispering to each other, outraged. Miranda Townsend, cheating in plain sight? The outrage crackled through the crowd. Already, people shook their heads in disapproval, sending pitying looks Garrett's way. Some shot angry, disillusioned glances at Miranda. Spencer, red-faced, lunged again. "You're humiliating yourself," he snarled at Cassandra, oblivious to the fact she wasn't truly the woman he craved. In response, Adam delivered a swift punch. Spencer reeled backward, crashing onto the polished floor with a cry. The room erupted in shocked gasps. Cameras flashed. A few guests cried out for someone to intervene, but the drama seemed to hold them in a collective trance. In the midst of it, Cassandra and Adam seized their chance to dart away, heading toward the corridor that led to the back exit. The room's energy hung in the air like static electricity. Spencer lay doubled over, clutching his stomach, as a handful of onlookers gawked or tututted. Soft, classical music, which had resumed automatically from the house speakers, felt jarringly out of place amid the shock and confusion. At the far side, Russell Harrington stood utterly still, eyes narrowed in fury. He seemed torn between storming after the fleeing Miranda and attempting damage control with the flabbergasted VIPs. By the time he made a move, Cassandra and Adam had vanished into the crowd. Garrett, with a well-rehearsed look of pained resignation, let out a sorrowful sigh. Several of Miranda's colleagues approached him, voices low with sympathy. Becky Hansen, tears in her eyes, touched his arm. "I'm so sorry, Garrett. I never thought she'd do something like this. In public." He nodded, feigning a trembling smile. I'll manage." Behind him, a few outraged donors muttered about canceling pledges to Westbridge Academy. "If the headmistress can't keep her own marriage straight, how can she run a respectable school?" one whispered to another. A local council member turned away in disgust, fishing for a jacket to leave. The bishop quietly slipped out the front door, crossing himself in dismay. Spencer, still reeling from the blow, scrambled to his feet. His mask had fallen aside, revealing a bruise forming on his jaw. He glared around, half-dazed, before limping toward the exit. The once proud PR man had become a spectacle, abandoned to scandalous whispers. In a low-lit hallway off the main room, Garrett found Cassandra waiting, breathing hard. Adam hovered at her side, scanning for potential confrontations. Garrett pressed a small envelope of cash into Cassandra's hand. "Thank you," he whispered. I know this was extreme. Cassandra's gaze flicked from the envelope to him. Her voice held a note of compassion. I've never done something quite like that. You must truly love your wife to go to these lengths. A flash of guilt tore through him. I love my kids, he said. I had no other choice. She nodded understandingly, then slipped away with Adam. Within minutes, they disappeared through the back door, merging into the dark night. Garrett exhaled shakily. Despite his internal turmoil, the plan was complete. Illusions set in motion, reputations battered, and a crucial turning point achieved. Back upstairs in the master bedroom, the real Miranda lay curled up in the satin nightgown, breathing evenly as the sedative kept her unconscious. She remained unaware of the chaos unfolding below. The muffled sound of anxious voices seeped under the door, but it never roused her. Meanwhile, on the main staircase, Russell lingered with his phone in hand, already calling in Favor's desperate attempts to contain the scandal. His face was etched with rage and disbelief. For all his cunning, even he hadn't predicted a meltdown this public, this humiliating for his daughter. The raw heartbreak on Garrett's face only fanned the rumors that Miranda had truly gone off the rails. Eventually, the once lively party disbanded in hushed scandal. Some guests drifted out awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. Others left in a swirl of whispered condemnation. Garrett stood near the door, offering stiff goodbyes, each farewell a new wave of pity or censure. By the time the last stragglers departed, the mansion felt empty, stripped of the glitz and merriment, replaced by the aftertaste of betrayal. Becky was among the final ones to go. She hesitated, glancing upstairs where Miranda presumably was. Garrett, you should get some rest. The shock of all this... He forced a weary nod. Yeah, he murmured. I'll be fine. After she left, he locked the front door, hearing the distant echo of midnight bells from a church clock. The house was silent now, only dotted with half-empty champagne flutes and discarded masks. Treading softly, he went upstairs to check on Miranda. She still slept, oblivious to the cataclysm that had rocked her reputation. He drew the bedroom curtains shut, heart clenching with mixed triumph and guilt. In the foyer below, Russell stood motionless, shoulders slumped. He didn't even look at Garrett, lost in the realization that his carefully crafted empire for Miranda was in peril. The older man's lips tightened, as though he tasted ashes. Without a word, he strode out into the night, letting the door slam behind him. Garrett lingered in the silent corridor, listening to the echo fade. It struck him how everything had changed in just one evening. He pressed his palms against the cold banister, the adrenaline finally ebbing, leaving him with a raw ache in his chest. He couldn't yet fathom the coming fallout. All that mattered was that he'd secured proof and public outcry to cover his plan. A swirl of conflicting emotions swept through him: remorse, relief, sorrow, and a measure of grim resolve. He had staged the perfect betrayal to save his family from a twisted future. And as the final guests' cars pulled away from the driveway, the Townsend mansion stood quiet, a grand stage that had just witnessed the first act of an unfolding tragedy. Miranda Townsend woke with her head pounding like a bass drum. Sharp sunlight pierced through half-drawn curtains, intensifying the dull ache in her temples. She groaned, squinting at the unfamiliar sense of heaviness in her limbs. The last thing she remembered was greeting guests at the masquerade, but everything after that was a blur, as if someone had unplugged her memory. She tried lifting herself from the rumpled bed, only to notice she was dressed in a simple satin nightgown, definitely not the silver gown she'd worn at the party. An uneasy knot formed in her stomach. Did I black out? She swiped a hand across her forehead, finding perspiration beading at her hairline. The clock on the nightstand read 9:46 a.m., dangerously late by her usual routine. Stumbling to the window, Miranda pushed the curtains aside. Beneath her, on the mansion's front lawn, she saw catering trucks pulling away, staff collecting leftover decorations. Her eyes flicked across the driveway, where a few news vans were parked, cameras angled at the house. A surge of panic shot through her. News vans? She gripped the windowsill, heart pounding. Something big must have happened. A gentle rap at the door startled her. She turned, breath catching as Garrett stepped in. face drawn and serious. "You're awake," he said quietly, crossing the room. He didn't look angry so much as resigned. "I wasn't sure how long you'd be out." She rubbed her temples, voice shaky. "Garrett, I don't remember what happened last night. My head's splitting. Why are there news vans outside?" He paused, exhaling heavily. "You might want to check your phone, Miranda," he said, gesturing toward her nightstand. "A lot of people have been trying to reach you." Frowning, she reached for her phone. The screen showed dozens of missed calls, texts, and voicemails, from Westbridge Academy board members, from local reporters, even from the bishop's office. She unlocked it, reading the barrage of frantic, disbelieving messages. "Board chair, 1:02 a.m. Miranda, we need an explanation. This behavior is unacceptable, Bishop Caldwell, 6:15 a.m. I'm shocked at your public conduct. Please return my call immediately. Local news reporter, 7:49 a.m. Mrs. Townsend, can you comment on your scandalous appearance last night?" Her stomach twisted, dread gathering in her chest. "Garrett," she whispered. "Well, what do they mean by behavior? Did I do something terrible?" His jaw tensed. "You openly cavorted with another man at our party," he said, voice hollow. "In front of everyone. The donors, the bishop, the press. People filmed it, posted it online within hours." She stared at him, mind reeling. That can't be. I have no memory of it." She dragged a shaky hand through her hair. "There's some mistake." His eyes flickered with pain. "Is there? You said you'd keep your affair hidden, but guess that changed." He cleared his throat. "I told folks the truth, that you forced me to accept your lover or you'd destroy me. I've protected you for so long, but last night you exposed everything yourself." Miranda's eyes stung with tears. She tried to speak, but only managed a choked whisper. "I wouldn't do that, not in public," she insisted. "Someone must have, maybe I was drugged or—" Garrett raised a hand. "Listen," he said, his voice quiet yet firm. "Everyone saw you dancing with some guy, mocking Spencer. You two practically brawled. By the end, half the guests left in disgust." Her breath caught. "Spencer? He was there, of course, but—" She trailed off, pressing a palm to her forehead. The headache felt like shards of glass grinding behind her eyes. She genuinely couldn't recall any part of the night's meltdown. A sudden flurry of vibrations drew their attention to her phone again. Another wave of messages from colleagues, donors, acquaintances, each more outraged than the last. One text read, "Board member, due to your blatant misconduct, we demand your immediate resignation from Westbridge Academy." Miranda's knees buckled. She sank onto the bed, phone slipping from her fingers. The swirl of condemnation was almost unreal. "This will ruin my career," she croaked. "Everything I've worked for." Garrett sighed. "Like I said, I only told them what you told me, that you wanted free reign, no matter who got hurt." Tears sprang to her eyes. She wanted to scream that it was a lie she'd never have orchestrated such a public fiasco. But in her clouded memory and the onslaught of evidence, how could she refute it? The vile taste of betrayal rose in her throat. Was it Spencer? Or is Garrett twisting things? Before she could form another word, the phone buzzed again. Her father's number lit up the screen. She cast Garrett a look of terror. He nodded, stepping back. "You might want to hear what Russell has to say." Clutching the device, Miranda swiped to accept the call, preparing to face the storm she never saw coming. Later that morning, the Townsend Mansion's living room felt like ground zero for a political crisis. Russell Harrington, face dark with fury, prowled the space, phone to his ear as he barked instructions at whoever was on the other line. The news vans remained camped outside, eager for a statement. Miranda sat on the couch, numb, while Garrett hovered near the archway, arms crossed. She overheard fragments of her father's conversation. "Find me a top-tier PR firm. Yes, immediately we need them to spin this fiasco. No, I don't care about the cost. We have to salvage what's left of my daughter's reputation." At last, Russell ended the call, tossing his phone onto the coffee table. He glared at Miranda. "I had to call in every favor I have left just to keep this from blowing up even more," he snapped. "Do you realize what you've done?" She flushed, eyes wet. "Dad, I can't remember anything, I swear." He slammed a palm on the table. "That doesn't matter. Right now, the entire city thinks you drank yourself senseless, flaunted some random man, and humiliated your husband in front of half our donors. Videos are circulating online, some from phones, some from the security cameras. Even the bishop is appalled. Fingers trembling, Miranda asked, "What about my job at Westbridge, my position on the church board?" Russell snorted. "What do you think? The board wants your resignation. Donors are pulling funding. The press is calling you a hypocrite. Hell, my own political allies are telling me to cut ties or risk my position." She tried to stand, but a wave of dizziness stopped her. "Dad, fix this, please." He rounded on Garrett with an accusatory scowl. "Don't you have anything to say for yourself? You just let her do this?" Garrett gave a brittle laugh. "You threatened me, remember? Told me to keep my mouth shut or you'd destroy me, so I complied. She's the one who went rogue publicly." Russell pressed 2 fingers to his temple, as though staving off a migraine. "You realize, Townsend, if there's any chance of containing this, we have to present a united front. Get out there and tell the media you misunderstood something." But Garrett shook his head, eyes dead serious. "Not happening. I've put up with Miranda's affair for too long, all under your threats. This is her mess." He forced a note of bitterness into his voice. "She told me she'd do whatever she wanted, that she was above consequences. Now she's reaping them." Miranda's heart lurched at how convincingly Garrett delivered those lines. Had he always been this calculating? She stared at him, mouth dry. Russell's phone rang again, the shrill tone making them all jump. He glanced at it, recognized the number, and groaned. "This is from the senator's office," he muttered, striding out to the patio to answer in private. Once he was gone, Miranda locked eyes with Garrett. "You're letting me take the fall for everything." "Well, why?" His jaw tensed. "I'm telling the truth, Miranda. That's all." But his gaze hinted at a deeper resolve. She swallowed back rising tears. The man she'd discounted as gentle and naive was now unyielding, holding all the cards. She wanted to protest, to deny the affair or demand an explanation. But her father's meltdown and the mounting evidence from last night left her paralyzed. She realized no one, not the board, not the church, not even the public, would believe any convenient claim of a setup without proof. And she had none. Russell stomped back in, expression thunderous. "The senator says I need to cut you loose if I want to keep my position," he snarled at Miranda. "And I'm not in a strong position to fight that." Her throat tightened. "Dad, you can't be serious." He shrugged, hostility flaring. "You've single-handedly destroyed your public image and nearly wrecked my career. Now they want me to show I'm not enabling you. If that means distancing myself, well, maybe it's for the best." A cold horror settled over her. "Even my father is abandoning me?" Garrett exhaled, stepping back. "I'll leave you two to work out your next steps," he said, voice clipped. "But as far as I'm concerned, Miranda has made her choices." Then he walked away, leaving Miranda feeling more isolated than ever. Russell's phone chirped again with text messages, likely more demands from political allies urging him to sever connections. He raked a hand through his hair. "Damn it," he growled. "You've ruined everything." Miranda slumped onto the couch, tears spilling freely. She'd spent years building an impeccable public persona. Now it lay in ruins, and the father who once championed her success seemed ready to discard her like an inconvenience. Deep inside, she still wondered how on earth she could have performed such a brazen act at the party. But even if she suspected foul play, who would believe her now? 3 days of unrelenting humiliation left Miranda in a daze. The internet bristled with headlines. Miranda Townsend's scandalous waltz, local headmistress goes rogue, and worse. Paparazzi camped outside, occasionally snapping photos of her in disheveled sweats, a far cry from her usual polished look. She tried to salvage her position at Westbridge Academy, but the school board refused even a hearing. They demanded her immediate resignation. Parents bombarded the school with complaints. Community forums lit up with condemnation. Sponsors threatened to pull funds unless that morally corrupt woman is gone. Meanwhile, Russell distanced himself, refusing her calls except to bark updates about his own political fallout. He even suggested she leave town for a while, let things cool off. The betrayal stung, but she was too exhausted to argue. Each passing day, the atmosphere at the Townsend mansion grew more suffocating. Garrett, for his part, avoided open confrontation. He spoke to her in clipped, polite phrases if they crossed paths, focusing mostly on caring for Claire and Lily. She caught glimpses of the girls peering at her with confusion, as if sensing the tension but not fully grasping the scandal's scope. One late afternoon, Miranda wandered through the hallway, eyes red from crying. She paused at a framed family photo, a happier time with Garrett, Claire, Lily, and herself smiling by a lake. Her chest ached with regret. The facade of perfection was gone, replaced by a bitter truth. She might lose everything. She clutched a suitcase in one hand, a small duffel in the other. Garrett appeared at the end of the hall, stoic. He eyed the luggage. "You're leaving?" he asked quietly. She took a shaky breath. "I can't stay here, not with reporters outside and the board calling every hour. Dad says I need to vanish for a while, maybe check into a motel in another state, I don't know." He nodded, expression unreadable. "I understand." Miranda's throat constricted. For all their tension, a part of her still cared for the man she once promised to love. "Garrett, if I can just figure out what happened at that party, maybe I could fix things." His eyes flicked downward. "Do what you have to do," he said gently. Then more firmly, "But I'm filing for divorce. I can't risk this going on any longer. I have 2 daughters to protect." The words stabbed into her like cold steel. She wanted to protest, but exhaustion and guilt weighed her down. "I see," she murmured. "It's all unraveling, isn't it?" He swallowed. You brought it on yourself," was all he said, though his gaze held a hint of regret. An awkward silence stretched. Then Miranda turned and left, suitcases in tow, stepping past photographers who snapped pictures of her tear-streaked face, a fallen socialite scurrying away to hide. She shoved her bags into the trunk of her car and drove off with no real plan, just the desperate urge to flee the collapsing world around her. Days later, Garrett met with his attorney in a modest law office downtown. His depositions included snippets of the scandal, video clips, and statements from guests who'd been witnesses to Miranda's outrageous conduct. It painted a decisive narrative. She had willfully humiliated him, effectively abandoned the family afterward, and her father's attempts to sway events had backfired. In short order, Garrett filed for divorce on grounds of spousal misconduct and desertion. Despite the typical leaning toward mothers in custody cases, the evidence was damning enough to make the judge consider a different outcome. Within a week, Miranda was declared absent, and a temporary custody order granted Garrett full care of Claire and Lily. The official hearing was set for months ahead, but multiple legal experts told Garrett that unless Miranda returned to fight for custody with strong evidence she didn't have, he would almost certainly retain primary rights to the children. For Miranda, who was drifting from one cheap motel to the next, the cost of a top-tier lawyer was out of reach, especially with her father cutting her off financially. In her fleeting phone calls, she sounded desperate but offered no solutions, no path to fix the damage. And Garrett, remembering the attorney's warnings and his children's welfare, kept his distance. A few months passed, enough time for the whirlwind of scandal to simmer down. The Townsend mansion no longer teemed with reporters. Gossip-hungry onlookers had moved on to fresh controversies. In the quiet that followed, Garrett focused on rebuilding a normal life for his daughters. He had resumed his woodworking projects in the home workshop, finding some solace in the smell of sawdust and the rhythmic hum of the sander. Claire and Lily, though initially shaken by their mother's abrupt departure, soon adjusted to a routine of school, after-school activities, and weekends spent with their father. They rarely asked about Miranda, perhaps sensing the heartbreak it stirred. One crisp autumn afternoon, Garrett attended a parent-teacher conference at Lily's elementary school. That was where he crossed paths with Angela Morris, a thoughtful, warm-hearted reading specialist. She recognized his name from previous newsletters and parent involvement events. Over time, a friendly rapport grew between them. Small chats about Lily's progress turned into longer conversations about home life and personal stories. Angela had a gentle smile and a calm presence, the kind that soothed Garrett's ragged nerves. Before long, an unspoken connection formed. One Saturday, Angela invited him to a local fair, saying Lily and Claire might enjoy it. The children laughed on the carousel while Garrett and Angela walked side by side, exchanging easy banter. It felt more natural than he had experienced in years. At home, the atmosphere lightened. Claire blossomed in her school art club, frequently drawing bright pictures that had no place for shadows. Lily chattered about a new dog in the neighborhood. Garrett found himself cooking dinners Angela recommended, simple, comforting meals that brought a sense of warmth back to the dinner table. Beckoning glimpses of normalcy returned. Russell Harrington, meanwhile, suffered his own downfall. Cut off from key alliances, he faced forced retirement or at least a severe demotion. Whispers circulated that he'd collapsed from stress. The man once so proud and formidable was now a shadow of his former self, undone by the very scandal he'd tried to orchestrate around. Rumor had it, he refused all mention of Miranda's name. No one knew if he even spoke to her anymore. As for Spencer Klein, his PR firm quietly let him go. City gossip placed him somewhere on the East Coast, struggling to rebuild a tarnished career. Garrett spared no thought for Spencer. His energy was devoted to ensuring the best life for Claire and Lily, away from manipulations and heartbreak. On an early Sunday evening, Garrett set the dinner table while Angela supervised Lily slicing cucumbers. Claire doodled at the kitchen island, humming a pop tune. The scene felt almost surreal in its domestic tranquility. A sense of peace settled in Garrett's chest, something he hadn't known for a long while. Sure, legal processes were ongoing, but he'd no longer wake each morning fearing Russell's threats or Miranda's secrecy. He glanced around the kitchen and let himself smile. Maybe this is the new beginning I needed. Outside, autumn leaves rustled across the driveway, painting a gentle swirl of gold and rust in the fading sunlight. For Garrett, each drifting leaf felt like an echo of the past, finally carried away, leaving space for hope and quiet, steadfast growth. A mild breeze swept across the green quadrangle of the Morrison Arts Institute, carrying the faint scent of newly cut grass. Rows of modern buildings lined the campus, their steel and glass facades gleaming under the afternoon sun. Families and friends gathered in clusters, some holding flower bouquets, others excitedly snapping photos with smartphones. Claire Townsend, now a poised young woman in her early 20s, stood backstage in the main auditorium, fidgeting with the hem of a dark stagehand's tunic. She was in her senior year of a theatrical design program, and this afternoon's event was the culmination of months of rehearsals. Her younger sister Lily hovered nearby, wearing a casual sundress. Lily had turned 18 last fall, a college freshman with a curious streak and a warm grin. The sister's father, Garrett Townsend, stood a few feet away, chatting with Angela, who was now effectively their mother in all but official title. Over the past 14 years, Angela had been a steadfast, gentle presence in their home, someone who taught them responsibility while showering them with unassuming warmth. The entire family had driven up here to celebrate Claire's final showcase, which she had code-signed as part of her degree requirements. "It's almost time," Angela whispered, glancing at her watch. "We'd better find our seats." "Dad," Claire said, stepping forward, "are you sure you're okay with me doing the last-minute stage setup alone? I know Lily wants to see—" Garrett grinned, a trace of fatherly pride shining through. "I'm good, honey. You do your thing. We'll be right there in the audience, cheering you on." Claire gave him a quick hug. 14 years had passed since that chaotic masquerade and the subsequent upheaval in their family. These days, their life felt steady, grounded in mutual respect. While memories of that old scandal were rarely discussed, a lingering sense of a hidden story occasionally stirred in the sisters' minds. But they never pressed too hard, wary of reopening old wounds. As Claire hurried off to finalize stage lighting, Lily looped an arm through Angela's. "I'm excited to see what new illusions she's cooked up." "You know, Claire, she loves a dramatic reveal." Angela smiled. "I'm sure it'll be spectacular." Garrett chuckled. "Let's get seats before the place fills up." Together they moved toward the auditorium entrance, where a throng of proud parents and curious onlookers filed in. Minutes later, the lights dimmed, and an announcer welcomed everyone to the Morrison Senior Arts Showcase. Scenes and vignettes from various student projects lit up the stage, some comedic, some haunting. Then, near the finale, a hush fell as the spotlight revealed a mesmerizing set piece designed by Claire, a swirling backdrop of color that morphed from dawn to dusk, symbolizing transformation and rebirth. The audience erupted in applause when it ended. Through all the cheers, Lily glanced over to her father, noticing a reflective look on his face. He clapped along, but there was a nostalgic cast to his eyes. It made Lily wonder, as she often did, what hidden chapters had shaped him so profoundly. After the performance, the crowd spilled into the lobby, abuzz with congratulations and celebratory chatter. Parents snapped photos with their budding artists. Students chattered about post-grad plans. Garrett, Angela, and Lily found Claire near the refreshment table, where she was gulping down a cup of iced water, face flushed from excitement. "That was amazing, sweetie," Garrett praised, beaming. "I love the color transitions." Angela gave her a playful nudge. "You'll have to show me how you did that digital projection trick." Claire laughed, eyes bright. "I'll keep my secrets for now." While they chatted, a woman approached from the side, her high heels clicking against the tiled floor. She wore a sleek blouse and pencil skirt, elegant but professional. A wave of recognition swept across Garrett's face as she stepped closer. It was Cassandra Rains, older now, but still carrying herself with poised confidence. She'd traded the hush-hush world of escorting for a career in acting and later directing. Her brown hair was pinned back, and a radiant smile curved her lips as she spotted Garrett. "Claire Townsend?" she said, reading the name from the show program in her hand. Then her gaze flicked to Garrett. "I had a feeling you might be here." Claire looked between them curiously. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" Lily also eyed the stranger, perplexed. Cassandra extended a hand politely. "Not officially. I'm Cassandra Rains. I'm a guest speaker for the Institute's final showcase. I recognized the name Townsend in the brochure and put two and two together." Garrett swallowed, heart thudding. He'd told Angela about Cassandra's role years ago, but they'd never expected her to surface like this. "It's been a long time," he said carefully. Cassandra nodded, warmth in her smile. 14 years, if I recall correctly. How are you, Garrett?" The short exchange sent Claire and Lily's eyebrows shooting up. They exchanged glances. "Who is this woman?" Angela, noticing the tension, placed a gentle hand on Lily's shoulder. After a beat, Cassandra turned to Claire. "Your work was truly impressive. I was thoroughly moved by the artistry." Claire flushed. "Thank you so much. You said you're a guest speaker here?" Cassandra nodded. "Yes, I was invited to talk to the advanced acting class about stage presence, but I also visited to see new design talent." She paused, eyes flicking between Claire and Lily. "I'd love to invite you all to dinner if you're willing. There's something I'd like to share, especially with your father present." A faint tremor of apprehension coursed through Garrett. He caught Angela's eye, silently asking if she was comfortable with this. After a moment's deliberation, Angela gave a subtle nod. The past had been locked away for so long, maybe it was time for clarity. "All right," Garrett answered. "We'd be honored." That evening, they found themselves in a quiet corner of Rosewood Bistro, an upscale yet cozy restaurant not far from the campus. Warm light glowed from sconces along the walls, and fresh orchids in slim vases graced each table. Once settled, Cassandra placed her napkin on her lap, exuding a calm but determined air. Claire and Lily glanced around the table. Lily finally broke the ice. "So, Cassandra, how exactly do you know my dad?" Cassandra folded her hands. "I suppose you never heard the story. I wasn't sure if Garrett had told you. It involves events from 14 years ago at a masquerade party." Claire and Lily exchanged startled looks. Lily murmured, "We remember bits of that night, kind of. We were really young." Cassandra offered a soft smile. "Yes, you were. That masquerade was the turning point in your family's life. I played a crucial role." A fragile hush enveloped their table as Cassandra began recounting the basics. How she'd once worked for a specialized escort service, how Garrett hired her to portray Miranda during the infamous night of that masquerade, and how the public meltdown was, in reality, a staged performance by Cassandra and her then-partner. Angela, who had known the broad strokes, quietly slipped her hand over Garrett's in solidarity. Claire and Lily, wide-eyed, listened in stunned silence. "Wait, so Mom didn't actually dance with that random man in front of everyone?" Lily asked, voice trembling. Cassandra shook her head. "Not physically, no. It was me in a matching gown and mask, but everyone believed it was your mother." She cast a glance at Garrett. The result was catastrophic for Miranda's reputation and, of course, beneficial for Garrett in your parents' custody battle. Claire stared at her father, tears brimming. "Dad, is that true?" Garrett inhaled, shoulders tense, and nodded solemnly. "Yes, it was an extreme measure. I was cornered. Your mother had threatened to strip me of my parental rights with Russell's help. I had to find a way to show that she wasn't the innocent victim and secure enough leverage so I'd keep you two in my care." A pained quiet lingered. Lily gazed at the flickering candle on the table. "So all those stories we heard about Mom humiliating you were partly orchestrated?" Garrett rubbed his temples. "Partly. The affair was real she was with Spencer. But the big public meltdown? That was staged. It had to look like she forced me to endure it, so I'd come out sympathetic. I wanted to protect you both from her father's power." A swirl of guilt and sorrow flashed across his features. He reached for Claire's hand. "I'm sorry I never told you. For years I worried how it might change your view of me or your mother. I believed it was best you thought the scandal was entirely Miranda's doing." Claire spoke softly, fighting tears. "Dad, you did all that just so you wouldn't lose us?" His gaze lowered. "I believed there was no other way. He paused, glancing at Cassandra, who gently prodded him to continue. "Your mother's father threatened everything I had. I knew if I simply exposed her affair, they'd bury me in court. So I chose a deception that I could control, one that ensured the public and the courts would turn against her, not me. In the process, I destroyed her reputation maybe more than she deserved." His voice broke. "And I've carried that guilt for 14 years. Lily's eyes glistened. "But you always told us Mom abandoned us. You left out how you set her up, even if she was partly at fault." "I'm not proud," Garrett admitted, voice raw. "Back then, all I knew was that if I didn't fight underhandedly, I'd lose you two for good. I would make the same choice again if it meant keeping you safe, but I can't deny how messy it was." A thick hush fell. Angela blinked away tears, placing her arm around Lily in quiet comfort. Claire, swallowing hard, asked, "Did you ever speak to Mom afterward? Explain what happened?" He shook his head. "She disappeared. By the time she resurfaced, the courts had ruled in my favor. I'm not sure if she ever suspected the masquerade fiasco was staged. Maybe she suspected something, but with her memory blurred and no tangible proof, she couldn't challenge it." Cassandra reached out to rest a hand lightly on Claire's shoulder. "For what it's worth, your dad truly agonized over that choice. He never seemed like a vengeful man, just a desperate father." Far across the country, in a rundown motel off a lonely stretch of highway, Miranda sat on the edge of a sagging bed, staring into the dusty mirror. A weak overhead bulb cast harsh shadows on her features, accentuating the tired lines beneath her eyes. She drifted from one low-paying job to another, her once impressive resume tarnished by an old scandal that refused to fade. The tabloids had moved on, but the stigma remained, making it nearly impossible for her to rebuild her life. A single worn suitcase lay open on the floor, stuffed with clothes that had seen better days. She scrolled through her phone, a battered device with a cracked screen, checking old social media accounts for any trace of her daughters, Claire and Lily. Each time, she found nothing but Garrett's protective privacy settings. No contact info, no open invitations. Over the years, she'd tried calling. Those calls never went through. She wrote letters that never garnered replies. Now, as she toyed with the phone, searching for any fresh hope, a wave of desolation washed over her. She typed a message she'd typed a dozen times before. "Miranda, unsent. Claire, Lily, it's Mom. I'm so sorry, please talk to me." But she never had a working address or a direct number for them. Sighing heavily, she tossed the phone onto the threadbare sheets, despair and regret sinking like lead in her chest. Where did it all go wrong? She whispered to the silent room, though she half-guessed the answer. It started at that masquerade. The memory still flickered in her nightmares, drifting in and out of consciousness. then waking to devastation. Over the years, she suspected sabotage, but no one believed a disgraced woman with no clout, so she'd carried the bitterness in private, watching from the shadows as her old life collapsed. Meanwhile, back at the Townsend home now, a warm, inviting suburban house with Angela's carefully tended garden out front, Garrett and his daughters arrived home late from dinner with Cassandra. Though the ride back had been quiet, there was a sense of hesitant understanding among them. As they stepped through the door, Angela spoke up softly. "Claire, Lily, you two want some tea before bed?" Claire managed a small smile, nodding. Lily hesitated, then asked her father quietly, "Dad, do you regret what you did?" Garrett paused by the living room sofa, gazing at the photos of the family that dotted the walls, pictures from birthdays, vacations, everyday life. He took a measured breath. "I regret that it came to that point, but I don't regret protecting you," he said. "If there had been a more honest way, I would have chosen it." Lily pressed her lips together, tears shimmering. "I understand," she whispered. They settled into the living room. Angela brewed the tea while Claire cuddled up beside Lily, tension slowly easing. Garrett scrolled through his phone, noticing a text from Cassandra. "Cassandra, thank you for letting me share. I wish you and your girls peace. You have a wonderful family." He exhaled, setting the phone aside. The house was quiet, the only sounds being the kettle's low whistle and the gentle hum of the fridge. After a moment, he rose, retrieving his guitar from a corner stand, a relic from his younger days. Sitting on a stool, he strummed a soft melody, letting it fill the silence. Claire and Lily exchanged glances, surprised but comforted by the calm sincerity in their father's playing. Miles away, Miranda stared at the flickering fluorescent light in her motel bathroom. She lifted her phone once more, contemplating calling an old contact or writing another letter, but she knew no one was left to help her. If only I could see Claire and Lily. The heartbreak pressed in, an unrelenting ache. With a trembling sigh, she buried her face in her hands, tears spilling onto the worn fabric of her shirt. Outside, a neon motel sign buzzed. The night felt endless, the road to redemption nearly non-existent. In that lonely room, her thoughts circled back to the night of the masquerade, to her father's anger, to the hollow feeling when she realized she'd lost her daughters. Maybe some part of her suspected the entire fiasco had been engineered. Maybe it no longer mattered. The end result was the same. She was alone, paying the price for her choices and for the cunning plan she never saw coming. On Garrett's quiet street, the porch light glowed warmly. Inside, the Townsend family, Garrett, Angela, Claire, and Lily, finished their tea, exchanging tentative smiles. They were not unscathed, but they were together, forging ahead. If regrets lingered, they were softened by the resolve to cherish every hard-won bond. As the evening slipped into night, Garrett placed his guitar aside, reflecting on Cassandra's words. His heart felt lighter knowing that, at long last, the truth was out in the open. Sometimes, he thought, the greatest love requires impossible decisions. He could only hope that wherever Miranda was, she'd find her own peace someday. Across town, Cassandra Raines typed a final text to Garrett. "Cassandra, I'm relieved the girls know. I trust they'll forgive you in time. Take care, old friend." With that, the story of the masquerade reached its final note, leaving behind a quiet hush of acceptance and the faint, unspoken hope that each person, in their own way, might discover a path toward healing.